Oh, yeah, yeah. Welcome back to the Bees Like That podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris. Tell me if you're like me this way. So, I avoid the update notification on my computers like the plague. Just because I don't want to be inconvenienced for the, I don't know, minute and a half that it would take for the update. So, I put it off almost every time. I put it off so long that by the time I do get around to updating it, there's probably been like 3, 4 updates in the meantime that need to be added to my computer. So it's just when I do finally break down or it just does it on its own, then it takes an abnormal, well, it feels like an abnormally long time. I don't know. I'm probably just really impatient and used to things going like this. Anyway, so I just did the update on the computer that I'm using for this. And, it did seem to do a lot. When I opened the camera app, the computer essentially presented like it was feeling like this. So we'll see how this goes. Anyway, jumping right into it. There's been a reoccurring theme or thing, topic, whatever. We're going to call it for the purposes of this episode a social phenomena of that I've been experiencing lately. And it's been pretty interesting in some ways because it's come from a lot of really unlikely sources. But anyway, this phenomena that I'm talking about is taking responsibility for how others might feel. And I don't know. I feel like what I think may be happening is in conversation, maybe people want to, I don't know, at least appear like they're aware and like conscious and, I don't know, critical thinkers and progressive thinkers and want to just like preface everything with like just these, I don't know, seems like redundant narratives, right? So as an example, if we were talking about white privilege, there may be someone who routinely wants to say, hey, not every white person has privilege. Or, hey, not every white person is racist. So, not to get too far off into the weeds on that. My question is, instead of that, would it be more useful to invite others by way of accountability? Like we ain't got to do this like in an aggressive and offensive and kind of a crummy way, But instead invite others to speak to whatever the issue might be, but to speak to these issues. Then when or if made to feel uncomfortable or they feel uncomfortable, what the definition of grace that I expect and that I practice dictates we or I do is to allow space for that necessary discomfort, right? It isn't, I don't think, a great idea to, before even getting into a conversation about like the harder topics, to first secure feelings. Hey, this I don't want to hurt anyone. That's crazy talk. Let's stop. We need to stop doing that because we all grown, right? We all grown, and there's got to be. And I base a lot of this on my experience, and how, even aside from being a black man, but just being a man, how it's culturally it's expected for us to just be like, we're not going to prioritize your mental health. We're not going to prioritize how you feel. These are expectations that society has and requirements that we have for you as a man. Here's your list. Here's your tool bag. Thank you. And you should be grateful for that, right? Because, not all y'all get that. So I say that to say that, of course, then that may create for me a bit of bias based on my experience. So what I do try my best to do is suspend. This is really hard, y'all, because I mean these are things that we live through, and they're relevant. But is try to suspend my experience because we can't expect ourselves from the world around us. Suspend, but still reference our experiences, right? Because these are the only logical concordances that we have to reference. Like I can't reference another person's experience. I can't reference your experience. I mean, it may add contextual value to a statement or an overall presentation, but the only thing that I'm an expert on is me. Anyway, leaving that space for that discomfort. This is the place where we allow people to be human beings. This is where the mistakes are made. This is where the growth in change is fostered. It's almost like instead of the default being what I've just explained, it's almost like people think that what will absolutely happen is that people will just out and out be maligned because they got something wrong. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I've certainly done it to people. I haven't always been the version of myself that I am today. And I still don't get it right all the time. There's still shit that is hot button triggers for me that I have to be like, damn, and I may not be even, I may in the moment conscious, I may be aware, but still so emotional and like I'm so connected to this extreme emotion and intense emotion in that moment, I won't take the time to stop and count to 10, take some, no, I'm not doing any of that. And I will have to then reflect and come back and, whatever the necessary course of action would be, take it. But in this circumstance, I think it is a great idea to, and this isn't cruel. I don't know why it seems like sometimes in today's society there's an idea that allowing people to be in their discomfort, usually when made after making a mistake, like this is mean or this is cruel somehow or not compassionate or it isn't inclusive, right? Like, oh, they don't know that they're racist or that they said some oppressive stuff. Well, here's my take on that. The actual, and this is just a personal opinion, I don't have any hard data or like studies to reference, but I feel like just from, this is going to sound silly, from a common sense approach, it's 2024, I feel like mostly there's a pretty good, people have a pretty good idea of what is racist. Now, there are some on the spectrum of between like no opinion or position at all and out and out radical. There are some pretty wacky ideas, towards the ends of these. But I feel like generally in the middle is where most people land, and like you can make some pretty serious missteps in this area, but I think that overall there really aren't any like definitive deal breakers, and people, goddamn, just have some have a bit of heart, put a bit of steel in your spine. That's like really, if we're gonna take it back a little ways, just fucking toughen up a little bit, man. Yeah, I get it. It's uncomfortable to get shit wrong. I don't like to get things wrong either. It doesn't feel good, but I get shit wrong all of the time. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, leave them with those feelings. They belong to them. They're not yours. They're not mine. They weren't ours to secure in the first place. And I mean, yeah, someone inevitably will throw at me the intent versus impact argument. No shit. That's all I'm going to say to that. That it's still not an argument for taking on how others might feel or might react. Now, if I know that a certain demographic of people reacts negatively to a certain term, am I going to use it? Even if in my mind I'm like, no, I didn't mean it like that. Of course I'm not. Of course I'm not. Use a little common sense here. But the teachable moment doesn't require our presence every step of the way. In fact, I would argue that our participation is probably less than we really anticipate that it is, or that we think that it is, right? Because we feel like we've got to be a part of this whole thing, you know? When it doesn't, just look like a baby, self-soothe. Now, if after 15 minutes they're still crying and fussy, go back and pick them up and try to soothe them again. But really, in all seriousness, let people, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being present or available to be a guide, you know? Because I'm telling you, like, when, especially with these social issues like race and poverty, all this stuff, when it clicks for people, and I don't mean to say that when it clicks that a person or a group of people have all of the answers or have things figured out, but I mean when they get it, when they understand what, I guess, the fight is about, what it means to push one another, what it means to, like, genuinely accept other people regardless of race or socioeconomic status or whatever. That's the space where we find common ground. 'Cause like a friend of mine pointed out to me not too long ago, I'm really good at pointing out where other people can't meet me at, right? Like, if you're not black, you can't meet me at being a black man, or my experience as a black man in this country. You just can't. Well, if you're not a black man, you can't. If you're not among the addicted population, and I mean people who suffer from substance use disorders and who are in or on their way to recovery, you can't meet me there because you ain't got that experience. But what we can do is we can come together in other areas of commonality. That's where humanity takes place. That's where growth takes place. That transformational change that I like to talk about, right? That's where brotherhood, sisterhood, that's where that stuff lives. Let's switch gears a little bit. And I'd ask that you would indulge me in an exercise of abstraction. Pull apart from the whole of your beliefs the things that challenge you the most. Right? So if you can picture just having, like, your belief system and the things in there, like, for me, if I picture it, they're going to be under this larger capsule, right? Or in this larger capsule. And then in this one area, restricted access, are going to be all of my hot button triggers, my traumas, and you know, addiction and recovery. Well, recovery's not going to be in there, but all of that kind of stuff, the stuff that upsets me the most, that scares me the most, that creates the most anxiety, whatever. That's where all that stuff lives. So I'm going to take that little container, and then we'll pull it apart from all that other stuff, right? I'm going to tell you why we're going to do that. If you're able to do that, then relieving yourself of the need to deflect or defend against the feelings brought up by these things, right? Insecurity, feeling, having my identity attacked, especially if you're a person who works in services and you're fighting the good fight, etc. Then I can set these aside from that, set apart from that, these things, and now truthfully and objectively review all of these things as thoroughly as possible. Like, maybe not at once, right? But prioritize them, you know, according to, you know, level of importance or need on your own scale, on whatever metric you want to use, is your life. Just do that. Do those things. Because I'll tell you, from personal experience, it was this. It was spending time here in that space that helped me move away from the perceived insult that is attached to that. And I don't mean insult from another person, but like that injury, like the moral injury, when these things would come up, that icky, murky, just dissonance, the tight tension that you feel here with the harder things that you just don't want to talk about, that just shut you down. That's the kind of insult I'm talking about. And I'm not saying that I don't experience any of that stuff, because I certainly do. But and it doesn't have to be like the stars aligning in a perfect environment, right? It just takes practice. So if I can unpack from, like I say, all of these big, intense feelings, and just set these issues aside and look at them and just evaluate, why have I chosen, what was it that like pinned the tail on this donkey per se? What was it that attached this negative emotion or this big feeler emotion to this trigger? What was it? And what causes that insult? What causes that moral injury? And that will help me do a few things. Two, the most important. One, like I said, not operate, or at least move a bit further away from the default perception of insult here, right? Because you see it coming and you get tight. Okay, and now I can say, all right, I know that I want to limit I don't want a steady diet of this, right? Because the outcomes here, just incurring that level of moral injury repeatedly over and over and over and over and over and over, no one can sustain that. But there's a space there. We're learning how to balance this stuff. And then you might, with some of this stuff, realize, hey, it may be age, and it might be wisdom, and it might be just growth and healing and, trauma that you no longer choose to ruminate over, because that's damaging too. But you'll find that, hey, I can take this out and just, I don't even need to repack this. And the cool part about it is you don't even have to understand why it was in there in the first place, right? So if you have an opportunity to remove that and take any of these things and take them out and set them aside and apart from you and away from you, so you don't have to deal with them anymore. And like I said, it may just be that the solution is you just don't ruminate on that shit anymore. Letting go and letting God, or whoever. You know what I'm saying? Who or whatever. That's that principle. That's that principle. We're not going to stew on this stuff. I'm not going to borrow anxiety from yesterday, or trouble from yesterday, and anxiety from tomorrow. I'm going to be present right here with this stuff. And I'll say this, and then we're going to wrap it up. If you're like me, and you're a person who feel it necessary to, or you've been called to certain things. Let's just say that. You've been called to certain things. And these things are polarizing. And what do polarizing things tend to have the ability to do? They can isolate us. Don't be discouraged. I would say continue to follow that calling, continue to follow that path. It almost certainly will not lead you astray. It will be difficult. It may prove to be the most arduous thing that you've undertaken in history in your life. But ultimately, I am a firm believer that no matter the genesis of this calling, to follow it, I think, and this would be one of the cool things, to follow it is to create an inner peace for yourself and gradually relieve from yourself, or from ourselves, the need for that affirmation from the world, Does that make sense? So, not to say that you would be at war with the world, because I don't want, language is important, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea. I want to impart this little insight, because this is what I do in my life. I don't have a ton of friends. I have some new relationships that I think are really, really great with some powerful people. But I'm redefining what my idea of friendship is, right? Because as I get older, I have to move away from I don't want to say childish, but the more immature ideas and definitions that I had for friendship, right? The definition that I'm building now, I'll just say that it's a departure from the one that I had before, right? Because the things that fill my cup, and I say this all the time, are service, family, and time. For real. The most valuable thing that I have in my life today is time. Time to dedicate and time to receive. Giving goodness from any source. Anyway, if you didn't do it on the way in, think about doing it on the way out. Please hit that like, subscribe, and post notification bell. And hell, share it with your friends, family, you know what I mean? Partners, work people, whatever. So you can stay up to date, and so can they. And all the cool, fun, critical thinking, equity and equality, tomfoolery, and badassery that we talk about here on the It Be Like That podcast. Peace, y'all.